Hey up.
Hello, mate. How you going?
Yeah, good, mate. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Welcome to the final player ratings show. After a game, we're going to have to do some sort of a season recap with the player ratings, but this is the final player ratings of the year.
Heartbreaking. All good things come to an end, don't they? All good things come to an end. It's an emotional time. What will we do with our Mondays at 6 o'clock?
What do we do on Mondays at 6 o'clock?
I don't know, Terry. I can't remember the last time we didn't have player ratings. So, I'm sure we did something really excited and enlightening. I can't remember.
We're going to have to figure it out. We might do I don't know, footy grid every Monday, 6 p.m. Footy grid Mondays until the season comes back.
All the cool kids do GeoGuessr, Terry.
I think I might like that one. I don't think I'll be playing any GeoGuessr myself, but yeah. Anyway, it is what it is. Hello, everyone. Good to see you in the chat. Eddie, Jimmy, Lucky, Albert, Hunter, Dione, Jason, Lucky Jack, always here. Christian. It's time to go through the player ratings from our preliminary final. At 7 o'clock, we'll do the BA show. So we'll touch on the game there. We will touch on the game here, just not in as much detail. It'll just be a little bit more about individual players. But for the final time, guys, let's go through the final game of the season. Yeah. Pommy, tell me about Jacob Weitering, mate. How did you see his preliminary final?
Oh, well, Jacob just doing Jacob things, really, isn't it? It's what you expect now. He's that kind of guy that we just expect him to perform when he needs to. As you can see, 100% one-on-one. He was up against Joe Danaher. Joe Danaher kicked 2-1, but the amount of times he was targeted, you'd say Jacob Weitering came out of this battle probably one up in that 5 intercept marks, continuing that trend that Danny Hoyne picked up, 8 marks and 4 out of 4, like you say. In that kind of game, particularly that second and the third quarter, where it was a disaster to be a defender, I reckon some of these players started having flashbacks to 2018 with that short hit-up lead, 55 out, meaning the entry is going to be deep and it's going to be a nightmare. Weitering, as usual, stood up and did Weitering things. He's kind of the most boringest player in the AFL to analyse, to be honest, because you just know what you're going to get.
Yeah, absolutely. The plain and simple. Yeah, I thought it was a pretty good showing for him in the prelim. I think for all of them, it can only get better from here in these big prelims. So not a bad showing from him. Probably one of our better, half a dozen players. So 7.5 for Jacob Weitering. Oh, this guy. Didn't he repay the faith? Caleb Marchbank. I thought he was one of the few that I would label as excellent on the night.
Direct matchup for 91.2% of the game. Eric Hewett. And, wow. He stands out, Hewett. He's got a very ornate nose, as my pop would say. Massive defensive efforts, 10 intercepts, 8 marks, 5 intercept marks. That's elite. Only got beaten one-on-one once, incidentally, for Hipwood's goal. But aside from that, it was pretty textbook perfect. Some errant kicks this week, though, from him, which, again, it was an interesting one because, I always think when you make selection changes, you've got to say to yourself, if the other guy was in, would it have affected the result? Kemp versus Marchbank, it's hard to say. Do you know what I mean? I don't think anyone can categorically say Kemp would have won that game. I thought Marchbank repaid the faith, like you say. Hipwood's a tricky customer. He's a bit wayward with his set shots, but he can get off the chain if he needs to. And it allowed Weitering just to stay on the danger man Danaher. He didn't have to switch it up. Marchbank negated him pretty well.
It's funny how it all came back full circle. The journey we've been on with the group. If you go back to the start of it, I think it was Weitering and Marchbank as the two key pillars. Well, that was the dream and that was the idea. And then obviously Marchbank was injured. Liam Jones has a turn in there. Lewis Young has a turn in there. And then we get to the prelim final and Marchbank's in there with Weitering as the, taking the number 1 and number 2 forwards for the opposition. So, yeah, I mean, look, this is a guy who, similar to Charlie, similar to Cunningham, maybe even similar to Doc, where we were saying not that long ago, is he actually going to be able to play consistent football? And now we go into an off season and, the idea of putting a full preseason into Caleb Marchbank is a very exciting prospect.
Shout out to Brendan Bolton, who famously in 2018 said that his dream key defensive pairing was Marchbank and Weitering. And I mean, take it as you will, because about 6 weeks later, he played Weitering full forward. But he might have been onto something. And yeah, I mean, pretty good game. Very good game for him, to be fair.
Yeah. So he got a 7. Adam Saad was next. He had the matchup on Charlie Cameron. How did you find his game and the way that they played him in this game?
I mean, the big problem here was we talked about it at the start of the game. Was it going to be Newman or was it going to be Saad? And you could see what Voss was doing. He wanted to give Charlie Cameron something to defend. Once that second quarter happened, they worked out a way to really get the ball on the outside, them short hit-up leads. Charlie Cameron started to go deeper and deeper, resulting in Saad sticking deeper and deeper and becoming more of a lockdown defender as opposed to the zip and dash and flair. Is that something that Voss at the end of the game may look at and go, maybe I should have stuck Newman on him and switched it up? He didn't. You live, you learn. But ultimately, very average what you'd expect Saad to do. 367 metres gain, that's way below. I mean, that's AFL average, but for a man of Saad's calibre, that's miles below. Ground ball gets miles below where we'd expect Saad. Rebound 50s, though, he was the guy that was banging it on the boot and trying to clear the lines in the second. It was a tough job, though. Once Charlie Cameron got his first, you could really see Charlie Cameron was ready for a day out. And ultimately, it affects his output. But it's worst matchup in football when Charlie Cameron's like that.
At the Gabba, absolutely. So a 6 from Saad as we move on to... we may have put Saad in a lockdown position, but I thought we unlocked something with Mitch McGovern. I thought he played... Well, I thought they tried to get him to become that spare, that, utilize his kicking skills. He was arguably our best, and I think that was probably the best game he's played for the club.
After Aaron Hamill came out and said that we are a 4-tall backline, and the reason being is we feel like we can match up on a small, and then 2 days later we do the selection and we drop a tall. This will create a really interesting conundrum for Michael Voss, because him playing as the sole interceptor and being given that license to roam, like you say, his output was the best we've ever seen for Carlton. Massive meters gained, the most on the ground. Do you know what I mean? That needs to be said. 638. When you're going at just under 87% efficiency as well, he learned to clear the lines and he hit targets. The 3 score involvements, 2 score launches, they're massive numbers for a defender. The ability to really get us going on transition. Carlton's first quarter's transition was incidentally its highest of the year, 24 from there. 10 rebound 50s as well, all to target. Massive game from Mitch McGovern. And he was one of the few that, in that, how good their forward line is, he looked really tasty. And it's worth noting we kept, for a side that averages 105 at the Gabba, keeping them below 80. Mitch McGovern was a big part of turning their attack into making them defend.
Yeah. I mean, the way he was kicking the ball was a delight to watch being at the ground. The zippiness that he had as well, like he was really up for the task for generating run. We know his speed. We know he's a quick player when he hits his top speed. And I just saw an energy from him that I don't think I've seen too many times. So I don't know how we harness that. The conversation about Zac Williams will enter our minds in the off season and in the preseason, and how we work him back into the defensive mix. But fair play to Gov, man.
His tackle on Charlie Cameron was a delight, wasn't it? Like, big guy versus little guy, big guy wins.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he scored a 7.5. I don't know how many more will score more than that, but let's have a look. Jordan Boyd. This was a great selection for those who love the conversation about selection. Obviously, he had the suspension, couldn't get back into the side, then all of a sudden he's back for a prelim. I thought his selection was justified by the end of the game, personally. I liked what he did.
A bits and pieces player. I think what's really impressive about Boyd is he was about 23% contested, which is the difference between him and Chincotta. He manages to find himself space and get out in that back half, which you mentioned Zac Williams. It's going to be a very interesting conversation, because somewhere between the pluses of this fella, the pluses of Chincotta, we have that in one player, in Williams. And at the moment, you heard Vossi mention it in his press conference. Sometimes when you have injuries, two players have to play one guy's role. You could see that here. His score involvements were good. His score launches, again, really hit up the corridor. Was one of the few players in that second, when the game was going away from Carlton, was still up for let's go through the corridor. Copped a lot of heat. I've never seen so many males in my life fractured from masculinity because he's got his nails done. That's worth a 10 for me. The fact he's rattled the feathers of the AFL fraternity, but it was a very good game, considering that he hasn't played for so long. He didn't look out of his depth. He walked onto that park as if he'd been playing every week, and credit to him. Big games to come back in and held his nerve.
That was the impressive thing for me as well. Like, he's not like a household name just yet, where, like, you know, he has to play. Like Harry Mackay missed a bit of footy, had to play, but, you know, he came in, he'd missed a fair chunk of football. He's still, I mean, maybe from my lens, it seems like he's still, you know, finding his feet within the club and within the AFL landscape, but they obviously love what he does on the inside, and good on him. He played well. I was pretty impressed with him. He scored a 6.5. Nick Newman, the bruised and battered warrior, Nick Newman. How'd you see his game?
Well, I mean, he nearly lost an eye.
Yeah, that was bad.
In the second. And tell you what, there is something that warms the cockles of my heart when I see a warrior battle hardened and injured and still doing his job. He was fearless. And see Jordan Boyd, these guys who have had a different route to where they are, really do shine up. He has been fantastic. The last 6 weeks of the season, he has been phenomenal. He has been phenomenal. He'll Paul Brownlow votes in the back end of the season. He's got a couple of finals under his belt now. And look at the numbers. Hard at the ground, score launches, fearless pressure. This is one of them conversations that if I am going to be critical of Voss, which I don't really want to be, why didn't you give Saad switch these guys up? Because you could see in that second half, this guy was willing. This guy was ready, and he was already playing that defensive role. But needs must, phenomenal player. And this guy is, when you've got the Zac Williams conversation, this is one guy that ain't losing his job. This guy is stonewalled round one.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, I'm fascinated to see how valued his contribution is come best and fairest. See how that plays out. Because I think early in the season, it was just so clearly Adam Chera. But I think as the season reached its totality, Nick Newman's name just kept popping up. So, no, he was enormous for us. He scored an 8, which is so far the highest score in the side. Blake Acres, the wingman, another bruised and battered player. What do you make of his game?
This game here, statistically, probably his worst game for the club. And I think it's really interesting when you look at it. You could see this guy was hurt. You could really see it. And it alludes in his running. It alludes in what he did with the ball. Them score involvements, them inside 50s. We know this guy generates them in the last couple of weeks. Has been really solid. You could see it. And this was a tough game. You're against the number one side with the ball. And this is where you'd look at Akers and you'd be like, okay, he's been so strong defensively. Didn't quite happen this week for him. And you could see it was maybe, and this probably falls under about 18 players. And I think Stephen nails it, ran out of puff. That extra game, you saw that extra game in the legs in the second half. Not a bad game, though, around AFL average for a winger, but for a guy who's built such a high standard and is probably written into the folklore of Carlton.
Yep.
He did well. And obviously, he had the save on the line, which evidently now he's replaced kicking the ball out of bounds on the full once again with a ridiculous spoil on the line. Great header, tell you what. As a former football player myself, you respect them headers.
Yeah, he got a lot of time for that. Yeah, we're judging it on this game. He wasn't at his best for this game. But when the dust settles, we are going to look at one of, if not the best and most valuable recruits of the year, considering what we gave up to get him and what he actually ended up contributing to the team and to the club on the field and probably off the field as well. Big ticks all around. So he scored a 5 for this game. Cripps, this was an interesting one for me. There was no Wi-Fi at the Gabba, and I didn't check stats at all until the end of the game. I didn't realize that he had 13 possessions because I still felt like he had an impact on the game. How did you assess him?
We've had the Fife curse with him. We've had the Steel curse. And now we're generating the Dunkley curse. And it was an interesting one, this one, because Dunkley found a lot of the ball himself. Now, Cripps, in fairness to him, we moved him forward a bit later on. Yeah. And you saw the impact on him. Didn't quite get going, but it has to be said, his influence in that first half kind of stopped Dunkley being so offensive, and that was kind of that equilibrium.
Yep.
Yeah, the day of the tagger is gone. The De Boer having 12 touches and 55 tackles is gone. The Dunkley is the modern day tagger who gets 20 and still influences. But Cripps, when he had his moments, took it, and that's what you've got to judge a player on. He had his time. He took them 2 goals. Definitely, you could see was hurting. I'd say the best, most honest press conference I have ever heard from a footballer in Australia for a long, long, long time since Shane Warne was around. His press conference and his delivery to the fans, you could see that was a man who was hurting, who was proud, who'd left everything out there all season and was raring to go. And you know what? It wasn't meant to be, but heroic at times from him. Heroic.
Yeah, no doubt. So he scored a 6.5. That would be
the goals.
Sorry?
That would be the goals that have bumped him up.
Yeah, no doubt. 5 contested possessions. Would that be his lowest tally for the year?
It'd be his lowest tally for a long, long time. It would be. You can see, he just couldn't get to the ball, and that's what Dunkley did very well. The second quarter, you see Blake Acres, he had a lot of the ball in the first quarter. When Carlton were going, he had 10. Cripps was going in the first quarter. Once they negated that outside ball, it really did. And that's something that they did really well. That's something that Brisbane, it's got to be credit to them. Tactics are very smart. Their tactical shift in that second quarter stifled this gentleman and stifled the last guy we talked about.
Yeah. I like this one from Jai, the 50-meter penalty that was paid. In the moment, when I was at the game, I thought, oh my God, Cripps, what are you doing? You've given away a 50 in a prelim. When I watched the replay last night, very stiff, but whatever. We're not here to talk about the umps. Ollie Hollands, young Ollie Hollands in a prelim. 15 kilometers covered, 72.7% disposal efficiency, and 17 pressure acts. What do we take away from Ollie's game?
It was an interesting one. We deployed him because I'm only speculating. Maybe the Acres, he was starting to flag. Acres played very defensive.
Yeah.
Hollands was given more of a direct roam, more of a direct freedom. And you could see that Ollie, he wasn't quite used to it. And obviously in a final, things happen. You live, you learn. Everything across the board, very average. One thing that we did notice different, that usually we see this guy in the 20s with his pressure acts and his tackles. He's really hitting it hard. This week, we didn't quite see that large thing, but as you can see, the 15 kilometers, elite numbers. Again, this guy runs for days. He's up and down the ground. He's stifling. He's always putting the effort in. I remember doing his draft preview this time last year, and I can't believe he's a pick 10. This kid's something special, and the experience from the last 2 weeks will hold him in good stead for bigger and better things in the years to come. But we probably needed one of our wingers to score an 8 or a 9 in this game, particularly with how the game went. And unfortunately, it didn't quite happen, but can't fault his effort.
Well, if you're judging Ollie on his effort and trying to make a case for what he's going to become, I'm so grateful that he played in this game because of the experience that he now gets. And like, when's the last time a Carlton team had a first-year player playing in finals? You know, a lot of our guys have had to wait 6 to 8 years to play in their first final. Ollie comes in and plays a final in his first season. So it's one of those situations where, I mean, we've seen the work ethic on him. He's committed to the cause, hoping for an injury free off season, strong preseason, and I see a quantum leap as early as next year for him. It's because of the work rate of him, of the way he runs, the way he goes about it.
I think Bluebagger and Jacana nail it. Like, he's got guts and he's got mongrel, and you get knackered watching this guy run around. It's actually tiring. Output wise, not great. Do you know what I mean? We don't reward statistically effort, unfortunately. But all in all, it's what you'd expect. It was a tough day for Carlton's wingers because in that second half, we couldn't quite get freedom of movement with the ball, which is what they beat us at.
Yeah. So 4.5 for Ollie. Lockie Fogarty didn't quite have the impact that he had been having over the last few weeks.
You're going to see now it start to slide. So you're going to start to see the rating slide in the offensive sense of the word. This guy here is there for our pressure. And this guy has made his name for his ability to really put the pressure on and hurt people and speed the opposition up. It's no surprise he got subbed if you watch that before he got subbed, because the amount of time their backline had to kick and hit targets whenever they wanted was insane. And unfortunately, I don't know if it was the extra game, if the energy levels were sapping, but you can see here last week we paraded him that his defensive numbers had gone down. His offensive numbers have gone up. I've given you a collection of defense and offensive numbers. You can see all of them either AFL average or way below. Didn't quite work this week, but a few of them chose this week to not quite have the output, and that's the nature of the beast sometimes.
That is. So he scored a 4. As we move on to Doc. Another bruised and battered player coming in off a dislocated shoulder from the week before. Tell you what, when he kicked his goal, it all just made sense, didn't it? We're playing in a granny. Doc's kicked a goal in the prelim. He's capped off an incredible quarter. Still thought he was pretty good. One of our better players, in the totality of the game.
What a horrible way. If you actually look back at it and you think, what's the worst way to lose? It's probably that first quarter. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's the hope that kills you, isn't it? But interesting enough, Carlton deployed him forward of the ball, particularly when it wasn't quite working. We've critiqued in the nicest possible way Fogarty. look at that there. 2 tackles inside 50, both of them resulting in spillages, one resulting in a goal, one resulting in probably one of the worst misses you'll see kick-wise. 5 tackles, 1 goal, put his body on the line as you expect. If you could somehow bottle whatever Doc's got inside of him and sell it, you would have a generation that isn't on Twitter pot-shotting people, and you'd have a generation of real strong human beings. This guy is no nonsense, unforgiving, gives his all. And there's that story reporting, have you got anything more to give? And Doc said to Voss, I'll give you everything I've got and more. You can see he plays that way. And Petra nails it. First quarter, him, Akers, these guys were really setting the tone and the benchmark. And he ran all day, and it's hard to believe that the reports are he did dislocate it last week. And playing like that, mind-blowing. Mind-blowing.
It's amazing what the mind can achieve when it goes through adversity and it overcomes adversity, and how strong it can actually be. And I think Doc shows that. He scored a 7.5 as we move on to Matty Cottrell, another one of our wingers. Wasn't our worst, wasn't our best, sat somewhere in between.
Matt Cottrell will be one that we'll discuss in the next show, where we're talking about what happens when you play a winger at half forward, right? And this guy here this week spent about 78% of the time half forward. Very, very talented. Score involvement. He did the things, the marks just around where it is. He took his goal well. It's a staple Matt Cottrell goal as well. It's like the most Matt Cottrell-y goal you'll ever see. It's like rinse and repeat. Works hard, runs hard. Had the opportunity to kick another goal. Was poor. There was a couple of instances where he's running inside 50 as well, and he could have probably done better with the delivery. It's a lot easier to bomb it in from the wing, which is his natural instinct, than it is them little intricate kicks. But, I mean, this guy puts his heart and soul into it. I mean, what can you criticize? There's not much you can ask for him. He maximizes his talent. I think he is this generation's Ed Kerner. He literally gives and puts out 110% of what's inside of him.
Yep, well said. He scored a 6. Jack Martin, you know, at the time of the game, when I watched it live, for whatever reason, afterwards, I forgot when he had the ball, and I felt like I didn't see much of him at all. And I watched the replay, and he wasn't as bad as what I felt. This was a reminder of why you have to watch the replay as soon as possible.
Dimitar Berbatov reincarnated is Jack Martin.
So, such a good comparison.
Do you know what I mean? He's the kind of guy that when you're at the ground, you slag off and you're like, fucking run, do something. And then you realize that when he does get the ball, magic happens. Yep. 2 goals, he took them really well. The 4 tackles, he's one of the few when McKenna started coming off halfback.
Yeah.
He was making him accountable. What I really enjoy, one thing that needs to improve with Jack Martin, and this is more of a midfield. This is more of, I thought what was great is between that second and third quarter, if you were blind, you could actually understand what's the difference between the two clubs. And their Jack Martins and their players who are playing that high half forward role coming out to about 65 and allowing an extra kick to go as deep as possible. And this is where Jack just needs to improve a little bit, right? And Jason Badger nails it. Too many high kicks to the 50. This guy here needs to be getting the ball about 55, 60 out. Same with Cottrell, and then we get it in as deep as possible so we can really enact our forward pressure. And Jack just couldn't get that. We either didn't find him, or he's too deep, or he's too far into the 50. It's just trying to find that equilibrium with Jack. But when he has his chances, he takes his chances and he nails it. And once Carlton sharpen up that smarts 75 to 50, Jack Martin will blow up.
Yeah. Well, you know, this is another one who we've been talking about with frustration for a long time because he hasn't been able to get on top of his calves or his body. He gives us a really solid run of consecutive games to finish the season off. it's no secret that we're a better side with him in it, and it's just a fingers crossed proposition that he can have a full preseason and play 20 games, 22 games next year. That would make us such a threat because he's a difference maker. So we'll see how that one goes. But a 6.5 for Jack as we move on to Charlie. Yeah, just it's his first final series, and it's good. It's good for him. It's a bit of adversity, nothing he hasn't dealt with before. I feel like it's the next layer of adversity. That the previous one was the body, the injuries, the health. That was a long time coming. He got through that, and now it's adversity that is coming in the form of what happens on field, and that's great. It's a good. It's a better situation to be in than sitting here and hoping, is he ever going to play again?
Yeah, I mean, for people complaining about his final series, it hasn't been good. Like, there's no escaping it. But then again, when you've kicked 80 plus goals, you'd be bottom 4 if he wasn't in your team. Yeah. So, you've got to ask yourself, what would you rather do? Would you rather go to the prelim, or would you rather go back to being 17th and 16th again? They were fun times, weren't they? I mean, this is partly, right? This is partly midfield needs to get the ball deeper to him. And Charlie needs to find a way to bring the ball to ground and play to his strengths, which I feel in the last 3 weeks, where we saw when Harry wasn't there early season, it really worked out that if I bring it to ground, I can beat 3 people. I'm quicker. Kind of felt like Charlie at times, and this is me being critical, and I'm his number 1 fan, he's waiting for the ball to land in his mitts and maybe not playing on instinct a little bit. But ultimately, he's finding something. Petra nails it. Do you know what I mean? Last week, we saw a bit of pressure from him. This week, again, we saw it. But we need a bit more from Charlie, and it's going to be interesting. I felt since the finals and since Harry's come back, you could see that they haven't played together for a while. And this week, you saw Jack Martin, you saw Harry, you saw Charlie go for the same ball, which when we started to play well, round 14, round 15, they all seem to have their individual jobs. Charlie will be fine, though. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't know football if you're criticising this guy. Said it about Harry, I'll say it about Charlie. If Carlton, Nick Austin lost his mind and said these guys are up for trade, 17 clubs are putting in big offers for them too. So he's had the finals out of the way now. He's done it. Sure, next time will be better.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to, call it for what it is. I don't think anyone's going to be more critical of Charlie than Charlie. And also there's the point about, mate, he helped get us here in a really big way. And I from my experience, key forwards don't generally dominate big finals. There are a couple of games where they obviously do. I know Buddy had a couple early on, but prelims and grannies, I don't remember too many times a key forward. Somebody in the chat, let me know, remind me, when's the last time a key forward kicked 4 or 5 goals in a prelim or a granny? I don't know if it happens too often, and no, it's pretty straightforward for me. It's his first final series, and, he'll get there. So he scored a 4 for this game.
Spawn and Darcy Gardner learnt the secret, and it was quite interesting. You could see Darcy Gardner was looking to spoil first, and that was the one thing that Charlie needs to work really hard to get in front. And there was a bit of Brennan Cox in this game. I remember speaking to Charlie when he played Brennan Cox and said that he didn't lead him to the ball. He stayed with Brennan, and it allowed Brennan to always go over his head and punch it. That happened a lot with Darcy Gardner. Darcy Gardner just managed to get his fist in, no running from him. So he'll live, he'll learn. He'll live, he'll learn.
I think this as well. I mean, we showed heart and grit and determination and ticker, but the cold, hard facts in front of us are that we don't use the ball well enough when we have it. We rely on our defense to get us through and our contest. But once we get better, I'm assuming we are going to get better with ball in hand. That'll just open up opportunities for Charlie and for Harry, who we'll touch on now. Harry, when he took his first mark in the first quarter, instantly, it just like he takes the mark, a big pack was around him, and then all of a sudden everyone spreads and we gain field dominance in that situation. And I'm like, how is it even a conversation as to whether or not he makes us better? He's such a crucial part to us.
I mean, it says it all where Charlie and Harry are that Harris Andrews lived on Harry, which is a great honour for Harry, to be fair, because I think at the start of the game, everyone would have said Harris would have gone to the main man. And this is where we say, when we talk about Charlie getting triple teamed, it's really important that the other guy is doing something. And he took Harry off. People saying Charlie got triple teamed. He didn't get triple teamed by Harris Andrews. Harris Andrews was following this guy left, right, and centre. So that says it in itself. Charlie needs to work a little bit smarter. His work around the ground, brilliant. This is where Carlton need to find, and I keep drumming this home, and spoiler for the next show, I'll keep drumming this home, that getting an extra kick inside 50 is so integral to freeing up Charlie, freeing up Harry, getting goals from the smalls. And this last 4 weeks, we haven't seen it as proficiently as we have done in them 10 wins, them 9 wins. Harry works hard, though. The 4 contested marks back to his best, one-on-one. He's the one who leans into his defender and takes them. 2 goals, he took them. Could have had more. The marks around the ground, really good. And again, we just need that conduit. And this is where we kind of, dare I say it, we know I'm a big fan of conduit, the word. Jack Silvani, being in that 65, he's probably the only player we have at the moment who shows that willingness to run from deep inside 50 to 65 out. Carlton need to replicate that somewhere, because if you had Harry there, that would have been tasty. But he worked hard, worked tirelessly.
Kicked his early goal. The crowd got around him. That was a good moment too. You could tell that he gained confidence from it. So that was good. So
shout out to the fans as well. They were cheering hard for him. I mean, he needs a bit of love.
Yeah, man. It was important. So it was 6.5 for Harry. Pito, we will go straight to his score. How do we look at Pito's game? Also bruised and battered.
Well, I mean, aside from the clearances, Oscar McInerney did what he wanted.
Yep.
That's the nature of the beast, unfortunately. This is a tough game. And you look, Oscar McInerney, he pretty much did all the ruck work on his own as well. Carlton split theirs 50-50. McInerney did it on his own and never looked tired. He broke even with clearances with him, smashed him in the stoppage clearances, and the hit outs, which is usually his strength. Big O killed him. Yeah. And if we're going to judge him, you've got to be honest. He got battered. He got battered, did better than that.
Yeah. Big O, mate. He's very intelligent. He's a very intelligent ruckman.
What can you say? McInerney is something that Pitternet needs to look at his game and say that you look at the clearances, both of them equal. You look at their work around the ground and how they slot in. McInerney ain't quick, but he slots in. He's earned his role, and this is something we need to look at with Pitternet. Gotta find your way. You gotta find your way to impact elsewhere.
Yep.
And yeah, it was very one-dimensional. You can't dine out on hit outs. You've got to do something else.
No, you've got to add more layers. No doubt. I mean, he doesn't need to be great at other things, but he needs to not be. There needs to be a level of proficiency at something else, so we don't find ourselves in this situation. But he'll get there. He'll learn.
His work around the ground is like the end credits of the 1980s Incredible Hulk. It's just him walking on a road with a fucking backpack. Do you know what I mean? Like, I say it when we win as well. I'm consistent. I complain about it. Just do something on the ground. Anything.
George Hewett. He wasn't as dynamic, I didn't think. But thing about George, he's so clean. He's so clean when others are not. And he's so vital to us because of it.
The only time this year you'll see me agree with Daniel Hoyne and say that it was an underrated game. Spot on. People are going to look elsewhere. This guy worked hard in the guts tirelessly.
Yep.
Was the surplus for a lot of players. When they were down, this guy was mixing in and had a horrible job in that inside centre. Once they got on top and they'd worked out, attack the ball, get ball side, and then get it out wide as quickly as possible. Hewett was doing his damnedest to stop that ball, and there was quite a few times he stopped it. In the second quarter, that could have been a bigger turnaround if it wasn't for this man. 9 contested possessions he picked up there. The tackles, the pressure acts as you expect. Ground ball gets real strong as well. Worked tirelessly. And George Hewett, I said it last year, I'll say it this year, easily cemented in Carlton's 22. There's not many players that can do that defensive work that he does. And it allows Cripps to have the game he had. And we can slide him forward, but it also allows other players to focus more on the offensive work, particularly someone like Sam Walsh, where we used to use Sam Walsh before Hewett in that defensive role. Allows us just to focus on getting forward.
Yep, no, that's true. So a 6 for George Hewett. Speaking of Sam Walsh, it's our best player. This is our best player. This is the guy.
To be considered great, in my opinion, you've got to do it when it counts. And I don't mean to downplay the season, but no one gives a fuck about the season. You can see how we've reacted. These finals, that's where it's at. It's basically just pre-season. This guy, since final has been at the end of it, he's turned it on. He's turned it on. And look at the numbers. Offensively, he was involved in just about everything Carlton did. His overlap run, and it's really important when people get so blindsided by foot speed, and it fucking annoys me.
Oh my God.
There's 3 things that piss Uncle Pum off more than anything: percentage, danger game, foot speed. Honestly, like if I was the king of the world, them 3 would come with a punishment of death if you ever say them. And you can see what Walsh does, and then you watch what the great players at Brisbane do. And it's not their speed, it's their quickness of use, but also their give and goes. And Walsh is constantly, and this is where Carlton sometimes come a cropper. They hit the handball, they don't run on, and the guy with the ball doesn't see it. Walshy is like literally, as soon as he's given it, he's waving his hands. He's like, give me the ball. His movement sometimes he's far too intelligent for players as well. They miss him. And this is something that is so interesting with Walsh. He is such a smart cookie. Reminds me a little bit of Messi when he doesn't have the ball. They always say you work harder without the ball, you get the ball. He's intelligent running and finding the space and peeling back. Few of them entries inside 50 were genius. He just peeled back and the defender lost him. The midfielder lost him. Absolute phenomenal player. He's tough. He's skillful. Fuck me. What a player. Love Walsh.
Full pre-season into Sam Walsh, and this time next year we're doing a watch-along for the Brownlow, watching him win the Brownlow. He's that good.
Perfect winner of the Brownlow. I mean, Voss and Mr. Kane Corns always compares him to Rosie. For me, there's no difference. There's no conversation. He's miles better defensively, and that's something that doesn't get talked enough. His defensive work this year and his improvement, mental.
Yep.
I think the closest part I've got is someone like Zach Butters. Zach Butters and Sam Walsh, for me, are worthy Brownlow winners. Strong defensively, strong offensively. And that's the battle I can't wait to see as they grow up, because Butters has worked hard offensively. Walsh has worked hard defensively. Them two going head-to-head in a final, that's what it's about. Both tough, both skillful, both don't die. They're the two that I'm looking at, not the Rosie. He'd batter Rosie one-on-one.
Yeah. So an 8.5 for Sam Walsh. Yeah. He's found a way to be very impactful with his possessions in finals, which is a huge credit to him. And as we said, get a full preseason into him. And what's this now? This is the end of his 5th season. Is that right?
Yeah. And you've got
end of his 5th season. Wow. We're not even halfway. We're a year away ish from halfway. So anyway, Jesse Motlop, young Jesse Motlop. It just didn't happen.
Yeah. So Brisbane 60 out. They're so smart. And Jesse Motlop just, it felt like he was reading a different game to anyone else on the planet. Mm-hmm. Like when you wanted him to come to the ball, he ran away from the ball and he went into the pocket. When there was an easy lead to the pocket, there's a great example, third quarter, Walsh does his usual thing. He gets the ball, he does a little pivot, right? And it all opens up. And you can see Walsh look up and he's waiting for the lead into the pocket. He leads into the central to where Charlie Curnow is. And there's no one in the pocket. And ultimately, Walsh has got one option. He bombs it in. And I do think from memory as well, Motlop spoiled Curnow.
Curnow, yeah.
Yeah, in that play. And it's a tough one. But you look at it here, what we're judging him on here is he was playing the high half forward. And you can see this is why Cottrell played so deep. You're looking for them conduits. You're looking for that. Very little marking ability from him, no score involvements, no tackles, just the one forward 50, which is one of his strengths usually. It was very poor. It was very poor. And this is the one there that Matt always will have been watching this in the stands going, I get that my defensive work hasn't been great, but I could have given you something. And this is a lesson. This is a life lesson for Motlop that you've got to take your opportunities. And it felt like he was one of the few players playing within himself. Felt like he was conserving himself, not trying to go out there and win the game. And that's where Motlop's strong. And that's experience.
Yeah. I mean, we just touched on Ollie Hollands, first-year player, getting experience into him. I mean, Jesse's 19 years old. He turns 20 on the 23rd of November. So he's super young. And I wonder if I don't know, I don't believe this would have been the case, but I do wonder if in the team selection, in the conversation and in the theorizing around playing Jesse or playing Owies, if there was a long-term view. I don't know. Probably not. But this will be a very good, Bolton used to say this will pay us back. And I think this is yeah. I'm going back to Bolton days, man. I watched 11 episodes of The Journey last week. That's where I was at. But yeah, I think it's just, I mean, it's not to say he hasn't impacted in finals, Jesse, and that's a big credit to him. But, it's a classic example of him just seeing, where he's got to work on his game. And that's just what it is, and you learn from it. So he scored a 2 for this game. And I dare say it'll be the last time he scores a 2 in a prelim.
It's harsh because we didn't do this when we were shit.
It is what
that
it is.
Is the lowest score since the ratings.
True.
It's stiff though, because obviously when we were shit, we weren't doing it. So I'm sure someone scored a 1.
True. Chera. How'd you find his game? Thought he was good without being Chera.
I mean, once that midfield got on top of the second half, this was tough. But I mean, he didn't quite change the game as we usually do. Interesting enough, and you can see there in the second half, we slung him on the wing when we slung Akers deeper. So that does allude to me that Akers wasn't the full quid throughout the game, which isn't Chera's game. When people always say fling one of them wide, I hate it. I hate it because this is what happens. He doesn't quite impact the game out wide. But that being said, him and Walsh are such an honour to do this show with, because defensively, I get turned on, and offensively, I get turned on. Both of them work hard. And it's no surprise that both of them have got that ability in traffic to do that little reverse pivot spin, and it buys them that extra half a second. They should be doing that in training, teaching every player at Carlton. You can buy yourself half a second more to think about it. Real tough game, though. They really attacked. There was not much time around the ball. but they worked hard. Worked really hard all game. And again, he was one of the few players that looked like he could handle Dunkley and Neil when they really got going. Him and Walsh really stood up to that role. And it'll be an understated game. People will slate him for it, but he was easily working all day and decent output from him.
Yeah, I mean, he always has that minimum standard. I mean, he scored a 6 here for this game, but he doesn't fluctuate as heavy on either side. So 6 for Chera. TDK. How'd you see TDK's game? Copped a really nasty knock right in front of me. That first one, it was right in front of me.
It's interesting when he got. Do you know what I mean? When he got taken off in the second quarter, it's no surprise that when we've just gone through Pitternet, that's when they got their confidence in the engine room.
Yep.
And TDK was one of the few that was breaking even with Oscar McInerney, particularly in that first half. Ryan Lester was interesting. This we've seen teams struggle with TDK because he's so mobile, and Ryan Lester was almost given a job of tagging him around the ground, which we haven't seen any team do. And if you told me that at the start of the game that they would send someone to tag a ruckman, I would have laughed. But they knew that outlet ball from him is really good. But one interesting thing that Carlton did do is down the back. They put him down the back as that backstop, which we see Max Gorn do. 2 intercept marks in the second half when Carlton were getting under the cosh. That were real strong and real benefit. This game here created that argument, and I know chat are going to love this argument. Is it TDK and Pitternet, or is it TDK and JSOS and he becomes the sole guy? And then you've got that conduit problem fixed. Very interesting discussion to have in the off-season. But TDK, he worked tirelessly all game. And it was a tough game because they went 50-50 against McInerney, and he was the only one that had anything to work with.
Yeah. I feel like we are about to enter next phase of Tom's career. It's almost like up until this point, I don't know if it's the year after next. I don't know. But I feel like there will come a time where it's going to be Tom and Tom alone. That's my sense anyway. I could be wrong. It may be Tom and Pitto. I don't know. But I feel like we've been building and sort of just waiting and developing him to the point where he can withstand a full season as the sole ruckman and maybe play Pitto when we come up against certain teams. Because I think they work well together against certain teams, but not others.
Well, I mean we were nearly 50-50, 59 contests and 41 for TDK, where 85 McInerney. This is the highest ratio we've ever seen TDK and Pitternet. Nearly 50-50. Genuinely, Pitternet does 70% and TDK slots in. So it really shows that Voss saw Pitternet was getting battered. And that then asks the question, if he's not offering something around the ground, the wonderful thing about TDK, when he gets battered, he offers something else.
Yes.
Pitternet, when he gets battered, he's just a big lummox.
Yeah. Well, Tom scored a 4.5. So we moved to Chincotta. How'd you see him?
I love Pom Cotter.
We do.
So much that I added my name into his name. That's the biggest honour. I mean, this one here, I think a blind man can see Zac Williams has to play in this team. And what I say, why I mean this with love, I love Pom Cotter and what he's brought. But when Zac Williams is there, he's tough like him. He's got he's got better skills than Boyd, right? And you can see Carlton trying to fabricate that between two players. Did okay when the ball was in the air. The one-on-one win, that was actually against Joe Danaher, believe it or not. This is something that we talk about every week with Chincotta. He seems to be a guy bigger than him. Unfortunately, though, in a game that they brought it to ground, you'd expect to see a bit more from Pom Cotter. But it was an okay game for a back pocket. It was a tough game, though. He really didn't get any momentum at all going. Bless him.
No. Is he contracted for next year?
He is indeed.
Great. I want him on the list, mate. I want him on the list because he makes the club better. He makes the list better just by being on it. And I know that even if he's not playing in the AFL, he's going to be pushing whoever is there for selection. So I think, when the time comes, we'll get to him. But it's been a really good story for the club and for him. So 4.5 for Chincotta. And then Kennedy. Matty Kennedy came on as the sub. What do you think, mate? And ladies and gents at home.
20% of game time. Had the 6 touches. What I've done this week as suggestions is correlated this if he played his usual game time. So that would be AFL average for the end. The tackle's a little bit below average. It's really interesting that when he came on, Matt Kennedy, you saw Carlton's ball use implode in its terms of they didn't have that dimension, that POD in the middle because there was too many similarities. And this is what I go back. As much as we love Matt Kennedy and we really like him, in reality, Hewett, Cripps, and Kennedy is bottom 4 football. It can't be sustained. You have to sacrifice a little bit of toughness for skill. And I think Carlton have found the happy medium of having the 2 defensive midfielders. It's interesting where we put Bam Bam because he's not quite a half forward. Voss likes him behind the ball, which you can see some of them touches there. It's a tough one. I didn't quite like this sub, and I don't think any sub on our list could have won that game. I'm going to be totally honest. But I just feel that at this point in time, it would have been nice to have maybe an Owies, maybe a different point, because that's where the forward line broke off. It would have been nice to do that. But be interesting. Kennedy's a serviceable player, and I think it's him or Hewett in that midfield.
Yeah, I get that. I was missing a bit of Cunningham, but I understood why Cunningham didn't get the nod because he'd been subbed in the previous 2 games and just fell away with his form. Maybe the lack of preseason exposed him a little bit as the year went on. Kennedy, I mean, fair play to get him, just to get back into the side considering how much he missed in the back end of the year and he got injured. So, yeah, like you said, I don't think anyone else who was available to be selected as a sub would have helped us win the game, but we'll never know. So a 4.5 for Kennedy as we move to the team. And doesn't that paint the picture right there? I feel like you could show we could put up a team, this exact graphic every week, and you could tell whether we win or lose a game.
Well, you can, when you've got them massive drop-offs below AFL average, we're looking for this. Remember I think a couple of weeks ago, we had one where we had a few and then we had loads of 8s and 9s. You've got to balance it out.
Yep.
For some of these players, your 7s from Newman and stuff, you expect it. Your game plan is based on them having a 7 and an 8. So when you've got players, your workhorses in them 4s, that's a problem. When Charlie Curnow's having a 4, it's the same as when Harry has a 4. We're looking at Martin Cottrell, who played forward this week, Motlop to have an 8, a 9 to compensate it. When one of them's got a 2, you're always behind the 8 ball. And unfortunately, you live, you learn, don't you? I mean, prelim final, got battered. Got battered where it counted.
Carlton get battered everywhere they go.
Oh, we don't have to sing that anymore.
No, we don't. All right. Well, Pom, I hate to do this. This is bullshit. That has been the final player ratings for a game in season 2023. This show has come a long way, just like the club. It was kind of existing as opposed to thriving. It was just kind of there. And then it hit rock bottom. Couldn't find a player above a 4 at one point, throwing zeros out, everyone throwing insults out, everyone taking things personally. Then we made a bit of a change. People took that even more personally. And now I think we've got a player rating show to stay. So it's been a pleasure, mate.
Been my pleasure, mate. I can't wait to do it next year.
Me too. Bigger and better. So those of you who are asking in the chat, we will do another version of the rating show for the season when we do the BA maybe the BA awards night like that week. And we'll go through everyone and we'll crown the BA player of the year based off this rating system. So we have another version of this show to come, but in terms of assessing a game, this was the final one. So thank you very much. Take it easy and we'll see you in a few minutes for the BA show. Go Blues.
See you in 2 minutes. Go Blues.